I don't think I need to say much regarding the debate last night, which, by the way, that was no debate. And we all knew that going in. Well, most of us did. I didn't even know there was a debate going on until a very dear friend of mine invited me over to her house and said, uh, let's watch the Biden Trump debate. Now, I don't watch TV, so I don't know, what's going on. And I've been going through a lot this last month. So I haven't really been paying attention to much of the current news politically. So I went over there expecting this to be a more of an ad hominem attack between the two. But what I saw was a travesty. I usually am not left speechless, but I was last night. I was going to do a response video, but I was so exhausted afterwards that I said, well, what am I going to add that isn't already being said on Twitter and Facebook and other forms of viral media that much more talented and skilled political analysts and geopolitical analysts aren't saying that I couldn't put together myself. So this video here is basically just me, complaining about what's about to come and giving my thoughts on it, and also adding some analysis with data that I have accrued this morning regarding the future, potential future, uh, regarding these two fossils who basically embarrassed us in the world. Now, look, if there's any Trump supporters or if there's any Biden supporters at this point, there are two diametrically opposed emotions going on right now that I see. One, Trump supporters are basically saying right now, that was a great performance. Biden supporters are basically saying right now, oh my God, we're in fucking trouble. These are the wrong responses, by the way. Now, at least the Biden supporters know they have a problem with Biden. Trump supporters see no problem with Trump. Now, conservatives don't like Trump. Right now, there are two major factions, of course, Republicans, Democrats. But there is a nefarious faction growing out of the Republican Party. And this is a group of far right. I wouldn't even say they had anything to do with the Republican or conservative political viewpoints and mindsets that I've seen. I don't know what to make of these, but they're extremists and they're ignorant. In the same fashion as, say, Al Qaeda or the Islamic State, they are what they call Salafists, what they used to call Wahhabis, but they are called Salafists. They're a branch of Sunni Islam, even though most of the Sunnis denounce these people as saying they're satanic, even though they claim to be religious. Well, that's what a faction of this group that's backing Trump is now. And in this group are very dangerous people. Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz. These are people who are autocrats, religious Zionists or fanatics, militaristic extremists who see war as their way to achieve peace. And they'll use violence as a form of conversation. Not to say that the left doesn't have their own problems. Now, I'm not somebody who believes in a left and right paradigm here, but tens of millions of people do. And I'm going to show you that there really is no left and right in this country. There's a bunch of factions fighting for power, but they have one thing in common, that they stay in power. And they'll fight over each other over minuscule things whether it's domestic or foreign or a mixture of finance, geopolitics, defense spending. It's really not that complex when you just step out of the bubble that you're in and you take a look at what the common denominator is within the public. And that is we all share and suffer at the same time, but they made us believe that we are actually the enemy to one another. Now, I'm not going to bore you with this. Look, I do want to talk about certain things and get with that because these are the more pressing issues. But I'll go back to these domestic and foreign issues to give you an example of what I'm about to say, which is that you'll notice that there is really no difference between Biden and Trump when it comes to foreign issues, but there are issues within the domestic policies of their administrations. And it's all designed to be this way because it keeps us not paying attention to what's happening abroad and also keeps us in internal conflict, whether we're sick, poor, unhealthy, uneducated, and we are. Just take a look around you. But it doesn't have to be this way. And not everybody is this way, but we're getting there. Now, let's talk about the more pressing issues here. Foreign policy. It's a fucking disaster. Look, let's be honest here. Under Trump, at least we didn't start a new war. But he kept the old wars running. That's because the Pentagon and foreign lobbyists like Egypt, Israel, Saudi Arabia, they pay our lobbyists millions of dollars. In fact, Saudi Arabia spends more money on our congressmen. You don't hear about it because everybody loves to talk about Israel and blame the Jews for everything. Not to say that their government is abhorrent, it is. Nevertheless, Saudi Arabia has to spend more money because they have nothing in common with the United States. Nothing. Nothing from the social sector, nothing from the religious sector. It just basically the kingdom is from another planet, in other words, mentally. I mean, you take a look at Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince and King Salman's history, you'll notice what I'm saying is true. Now, they're of course shaped by the ideology of Wahhabism, fanaticism. Now, after 9/11, the United States government, who is allied to Saudi Arabia, I don't know why, but I do know why, because they buy more weapons on the face of the earth from the United States than any other country on the face of the earth. Okay. So, and because we also regulate the oil market to an extent, even though Saudi Arabia has the power to basically say, no, you don't. We're dealing with Russia. We're dealing with Great Britain. We're dealing with China. We're dealing with North Korea. And that's exactly what's happening here because they're playing there. They know Saudi Arabia is finally getting to the point, hey, wait a minute. We have more power than the United States when it comes to this issue. We can jack up the price of oil by barrel. Fuck them. The United States provides protection. And that's the reason, one of the reasons why we have destabilized the Middle East. But once we have finally destabilized their ultimate enemy in Iran, Saudi Arabia is basically going to say, if they do go this way, but then the United States will say, well, I'll just sign more executive orders releasing documents showing your role in 9/11. That's what happened 3 years ago when Biden visited Crown Prince Salman, and his offer for a lower tax break, a lower price bracket on the barrel of oil was rejected. And all of a sudden, Executive Order 14001 came into order, and we saw remarkable information about the Saudi government's involvement with the hijackers inside the United States. Wow, just a quinky dink, right? Saudi Arabia is a problem because the kingdom doesn't represent the whole of Islam. In fact, most of the Muslims condemn the kingdom, and rightfully so, because the kingdom gave us Al Qaeda, Abu Sayyaf, Islamic State, Boko Haram, and all the other groups that are now gaining strength because we're ignoring them. Let me give you a great example. Is that we have Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. Now, I thought Al Qaeda's destroyed. Bin Laden was killed in 2011. Al Zawahiri, the second emir, who was currently the emir after Bin Laden, was assassinated in 2022. Al Qaeda, as we know, at the top level is all gone. The Bin Laden Al Qaeda is finished. However, that's not true. Saif al Adam, who began with the formation of the group, is now the current emir, unofficially, of Al Qaeda, and he's somewhere within the Iran, Pakistan region. I think he fluctuates between both. And the Taliban, who regained the country in 2021, thank you, Trump and Joe Biden, for leaving behind billions of dollars in weapons. I wonder why we did that. Maybe it's because we can always revisit an old enemy and make them stronger again after we weaken them. We don't eliminate enemies, by the way, anymore. We found out later on after Vietnam that, hey, wait a minute, we can actually weaken our enemy to the point where they're not a threat, an existential threat to our allies and to ourselves and interests abroad. We can always use them by letting some of them live, reformat, and then 10 years later, it's always a 10-year period generally, to go back and fight them again. And then later on, we'll revisit the Cold War once again. That's what's happening right now. We're concentrating on who? Russia, China, Iran, a revisitation of the Carter-Reagan Cold War period. Now, the Taliban, when they returned to power in 2021, allowed for Al-Qaeda to basically co-join their allies. Where they were tentative allies at first, now they're really strong allies because now the Taliban can control Al-Qaeda. Where Bin Laden was the emir and he was the leader and he had a lot of influence and a lot of money, that's no longer the case. Saif al-Adil is in hiding. And he doesn't want to be drone strike like he did, like Dr. Ahmed Zawahiri and the military commander-in-chief Mohammed Atta, Abu Hafs al-Masri, was in 2001. So the Taliban are basically telling Al-Qaeda, do not make threats, open threats to the United States and their interests. We're trying to rebuild here. Once we rebuild, we'll allow training camps to open up and have foreign Arabs come in the country. If you don't think that Arab fundamentalist groups are soon to be overflowing with recruits, especially from Gaza, especially from Libya, Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan, Algeria, for what this administration is doing, you are kidding yourself. These groups, like Islamic State in Khorasan, or Islamic State in the Levant, or Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, Boko Haram in Sudan and Nigeria, Kenya, who is going through a myriad of civil war, and no one's reporting on this except for the Libertarian Institute. These groups are beginning to grow again. And with our truly atrocious response to the Gazans and the Palestinians, which, by the way, wasn't even a debate point in the debate yesterday, predictably so, because Trump and Biden are Israeli sellouts. Nevertheless, these groups aren't forgetting at what the Biden administration did in Gaza, what Blinken, the Secretary of State, did in Gaza. Okay, right off the board, we're in trouble in the future. Right now, we have Ukraine, who, by the way, has basically admitted defeat without announcing it. And just to show you what I'm proud to say, this is from Al Jazeera today. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he's drawing up a comprehensive plan for how Kiev believes the war with Russia should end. It's very important for us to show a plan to end the war that will be supported by the majority of the world. What does he mean? I thought Zelenskyy said we could basically fight for months. The reality was they never could. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is spending billions of dollars on this conflict. Money that could be better well spent with the rising tax costs of housing, Medicaid, Social Security, which started under previous presidents. Yes, even the Trump administration, who, by the way, was notoriously abhorrent regarding Social Security and healthcare. All-time highs that we never saw before. Beautiful highs, the best highs you ever saw. Anyway, the Biden administration knew that Ukraine could not beat Russia in a war. And how anyone thought they could was in denial. You're no different than the conservatives' war with Iraq at the time in 2001 or 2003. You're neocons. That's the similarity I talked about between the left and right. There is no left and right when it comes to geopolitical foreign issues. They're all one. I mean, a great example of this is take a look at every single Israeli bill inside the United States. It's unanimously signed, right? Okay, let's use a recent example. The United States has unanimously signed a bill where talking about the Gaza death toll is not allowed. What? I think it was like 268 to 112, and 88 Democrats signed it. That's what I'm talking about. There is no left or right. Okay. Ukraine is a disaster. And what's going to happen probably is that Zelenskyy is either going to live in a villa somewhere in Europe, like Switzerland or Denmark, or maybe even Australia further away, or he's going to be assassinated by the far right extremists that are currently selling the Pentagon's military equipment, much of it, a lot of it, to groups that share a similar ideology like the Islamic State. Now, Bloomberg did a report 2 years ago about the Pentagon's shipment of weapons through the black market has been intercepted by these far right extremists that think Zelenskyy is too liberal and believe he's a U.S. puppet. Guess what? They're right. These groups didn't exist without the CIA. And I did a podcast with Richard Cox, my co-host on Darkened Hour, about the CIA's history, long history, by using European socialists, European anarchists, European far-right groups to basically spy on the communist bloc. And one of them was Mykola Lebed, who was a slaughterer of Polish Jews. And basically, the CIA hired him to be a spy and let him live in Detroit in the United States in the 1960s. But that's who the CIA hires because they got no moral compass. Israel. I don't think I need to say anything anymore, right? A catastrophe of mega proportions. By the way, this was not even a debate point in the debate for obvious reasons. Trump's a sellout. Biden's a sellout. Every single president since the formation of Israel has been almost a sellout. The only ones who weren't were the Bush family and Reagan, for example. Reagan was no friend, he was a friend. He basically saw the Israelis and Saudis as malleable, right? But that all changed after Clinton, right? Because the neocons, as AIPAC was growing stronger in the 90s, implemented a group called dual Israeli citizens. These were people that were living in the United States but had also sovereignty inside Israel or were living in Israel at the same time, dual Israeli citizens. People like Dov Zakheim and Douglas Feith, Richard Pearl, Paul Wolfowitz, people like this who have positions within the Bush government. And they were implemented there by the Israeli lobby and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. But there were others within the Bush faction that were outside of that bubble, like Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, who disagreed with the Patriot Act and the elimination of Geneva Conventions for foreign combatants and the Iraq War. That was all basically the influence of the Israeli neocons, Israeli U.S. neocons. After Bush came even more muppetry, if I will, Obama. Obama actually rejected one proposing issue by Israel, and that was Iran. Because at the time, Obama said, I got Syria, I got Libya, thank you, Hillary Clinton, Samantha Rice, Samantha Power. Um, but I have Syria, thank you, Biden, Timber Sycamore, CIA operation, giving weapons to who? The people that we were fighting in the war on terror that are trying to overthrow the Assad government, in which Israel wanted. And so did Saudi Arabia. In fact, Israel, King Abdullah of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all basically backed this plan called Timber Sycamore by the CIA general David Petraeus, Director Petraeus, who proposed that the United States use the Salafists like they use Al Qaeda. They don't control them, but they use them to give them training and weapons to overthrow the Assad government. It backfired. Assad is still the president. Nevertheless, this was outlined in foreign policy guidelines under Paul Wolfowitz, under Bush, and under the Oded Yanan plan, which was an Israeli guideline to show how to destabilize Israelis' threats in the Middle East, with Iraq being number one. That too was a dual U.S.-Israeli, U.S. Foreign policy plan. And look what we did to them. We killed over approximately 1.5 to 2 million people. Israel is basically a real fucking problem. These people are nuts. Netanyahu belongs under the Hague. What's even worse is what's coming after him. And for those who don't know, that usually every major conflict involving Gaza has a new prime minister, because a lot of the Israelis, tens of thousands, hate Netanyahu. And we saw that in December 2022 when he was selected for the sixth time as prime minister. Tens of thousands of Israelis took the streets. And for the, the far right extremists like Nick Fuentes and others like Ben Shapiro, I hate these people because they claim to be anti-Zionists. Meanwhile, they're the biggest racist, anti-Jew people on the face of the earth, and we don't need these people. Yeah, we share something in common. We think the Netanyahu government's evil. Yes, it is. But I don't want nothing to do with them because not every Jew is a fucking idiot monster. These people who are Christian nationalists, these are racists that use the words of Christ, who probably, they're the ones who would probably sell out Christ, just like the Jews did in the New Testament. But they are the Romans who gave them to be killed. So that's what Nick Fuentes and all these other far right groups represent. And we don't need them. We don't want them. We need rational heads, people who are moral and people who are rational. And they're not imbued by ideology. We want peace within the human community. And with Israel right now, we can't have that. And as long as they pay people like John Fetterman, Steny Hoyer, and Christian Naomi and Nikki Haley and all these other ghouls running these states, we have a really big fucking problem. And what's good is that there are millions of people really speaking out against this issue. But only if they realize that they have more power than what they are led to believe that they don't have. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Now, okay, let's go back to domestic issues. Now, I'm going to show you a chart. The domestic issues are also now pressing. I mean, it's been a pressing issue, but really, I mean, we're becoming much more uneducated, much more sicker, much more dependent on federal government spending. And we don't need to be this way. Okay. Here's a chart by the AMA, all right? The American Medical Association. And as you can see here, right? I'm going to, no, you know what? I'll show you a bigger chart so you can see it. All right. All right. Here we go. This is healthcare spending for the year 2022, right? 4.4 billion. Where did it go? 30% went to hospital care. Predictably, people go for all types of illnesses, mental mental health, physical health. And then second to that is other personal health care. Third to that is physician services. This is a problem, the physician services, because all they are drug markets. And really, that's regretful because, my God, how many times have you visited a doctor and you're getting an opioid or you're getting what's similar to an opioid? And all you want is basically an end to the illness that you have, whatever it is. Instead, you're taking this opioid to basically dull the pain that's currently not going away because you don't got the proper medicine to make it go away or better. Healthcare spending is basically going to major league corporations like Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, because they provide major league funding to the senators and presidents, congressional elects that you support with your vote and your dollar. And they're the ones taking care first because they provide more money. If mom and pop in New York basically are giving $10 to the Biden administration because that's all they have, hey, thanks, but we can't do nothing for you. But to the, say, a foundation or an institution or a corporation giving $50,000, hey, I like you. What can I do to make you more happy? You see where I'm getting at? To all you menial people, me included, I don't vote. So right there, I'm a little bit different than most. But to you that do vote and do support them with your vote and dollar or a mixture of one or the other, you got to start thinking to yourself, where's my end? Because nothing's happening for you. So then you got to ask yourself why I'm voting for these people in the first place. Okay. Social Security. This is really a pressing issue because Social Security at this point is in trouble. And according to an NPR report, Social Security trustees predict the retirement program, the trust fund program, is going to be exhausted somewhere between September and November of 2033, 10 years from now. I can get Social Security 8 years from now. I'm 54. And that will affect 60 million retirees. And that the benefits would automatically be cut by 21% unless policymakers and lawmakers adopt changes and add money to the coffers. Now, it's not like no president in history has ever stolen from the Social Security program. What they do is they borrow money from it, but they never pay it back. And if they do, some administrations actually have a 4-year plan where they actually, give a small amount back, but they don't get the full cut back. That's why you see cuts within Social Security, healthcare, education. They don't steal the money. It's not like they're stealing. I mean, obviously, because people would be in uproar. They make cuts. So in other words, we're taking out little by little. This way, we'll call it cuts. You won't know because they're very incremental. By the time you realize, hey, fuck, I used to have a $1,800 check, and all of a sudden now I'm getting 1,000. What the fuck is going on here? It's too late. Look, I made videos in the past asking people not to vote. What we are after last night, you cannot rationally say to me that the non-voters are the problem because I'm not going to sit here and pat myself on the back and say that I was right after last night's major league travesty. Donald Trump is an imbecile. Joe Biden is a fossil. And what's even more important is that the rest of the world watched this. Enemies and allies. Where in the real world, our enemies are our allies, and our allies are the enemies. Just take a look at what's going on abroad. But you're not, because you're paying attention to what's happening to you here. And that's all by design. And people like Scott Horton and Kyle Anzalone, Colin Clark, and great report, Connor Freeman, Patrick McFarland, Will Poyer, a lot of these people, Misty and her show, a lot of these people are basically trying to tell you it's time to really pay attention to what's happening abroad, because millions of lives are at stake. That's not an exaggeration, because it's happening in our name. And yes, I understand pressing issues are here to stay, but we don't have to make it stay. We can make these changes. And you're saying, what, how can we do? You have to realize that you're imbued by ideology. I'm a white Democrat. I'm a Muslim. I'm a Christian. I'm a Jew. I'm gay. I'm bi. I'm transsexual. You're none of those things. What the fuck am I trying to say? Those are learned applications. You weren't born this way. You're not born a Democrat. You're not born white. The fuck is white? You're not born as a Christian or a Jew. These are taught applications. The best thing about you is you're a human being. You're not like anybody else. You're you. Ah, that's the beauty of it. And the power that you have is the power of empathy. The one thing these governments, intelligence services at the highest levels, not everybody, defense ministers, military leaders can't understand. Because if they were empathetic, none of these problems would exist abroad and here. Because if we lived in an emphatic world with emphatic leaders, we wouldn't be undereducated. We wouldn't be heavily medicated. We wouldn't be this sick. We wouldn't be this poor. We would be living as what the Bible said, that heaven here on earth. Now, if you're taking the Bible literally, I'm atheist, so please, I'm not preaching here. But there are some great scriptures in the Bible, in the Quran, the Torah. And when you realize that they're talking metaphorically here, that's what Christ was doing in a lot of his discussions. I'm not going to bore you with this. But when he says that the kingdom of God resides within you, he was right. It's not in some church. It's not in John Hagee's church in Atlanta. It's not in Benny Hinn's church in Florida. It's in you. The Quran states, and I think it's in Medina or in Bukhari, forgive me, that whoever takes one life, it's as if he killed all of mankind. Because one life is part of mankind. And when you kill another person, you're killing yourself in the process, because a part of you dies. Ask any soldier that has killed people in the battlefield to talk about their first kill. Most of them won't do it. Because what they don't realize was happening at the time was as soon as they pulled that trigger and killed that person, the process of demoralization and dehumanization begins. And the spirit or the mind starts to lose its purity. And you could feel it. And I'll use myself an example because, I'm not an expert or perfect. I had a very bad relationship with my mother. And a week and a half ago, she passed away. And I didn't think I would be terribly affected by it, but I have been because I realized what I was doing over these years. Even though I grew up, in poverty and with abuse, but it affected me a great deal. And I swore that I would never be mean to another person again. And I'm going to live up to that. And I do these videos, as I said yesterday in my previous video, to try and inform the public about what's really going on without any bias or persuasion whatsoever from ideology. Now, I'm not smarter than anybody. I'm not tougher than anybody. I'm just a regular guy with the moon behind him in his work shirt who's going to work soon, trying to inform the audience because information is power, as I said yesterday. And it is because we can make these changes that we desperately need to make. And after yesterday, how could you not say that this is it? We need to make change. And how do you do it? By leaving aside these learned applications and ideologies, acting as an entire unit. All of you people from the left and right, that's it. After what you saw yesterday, you should say, we've had enough. We want a new government, a new fucking world, here and abroad. Let's make these changes. Let's make relations with everybody, with the people. Because believe it or not, if you stay on the internet, you're going to say it's a hopeless issue. Everyone's fucked. It's go outside, meet somebody new. Because that's what I did after my mother died. I went outside and started meeting people. And to my surprise, they're not all fucked up in the head. Some of these people basically are really nice people. And I live in a very left leaning town, but you wouldn't know it if you went outside and looked. But the effort has to be made for you to go outside and look and experience the world with your own physical self and not online. Because if you're only going to look for the bad, it's all you're going to attract. And it will reinforce your previously held beliefs. But once you go outside and experience people face to face and have a short conversation, you'll notice that you're not so different after all. That's what I'm hoping happens for the future. And for you who have children or parents, this is what needs to happen. Because if it doesn't, we're going to get worse people than Trump and Biden. And then the future becomes really bleak. I'm not going to say the end of the world is on the rise, but when you have people like Ben Gvir, who's the defense minister of Israel, talking about killing all the Arabs of the world and not just within the borders of Israel. And when you have people like Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who basically are allowing this and also slowly killing the United States citizenry with their domestic tragic domestic policies. This is a repetitious motion, and we will all suffer because of it. Let's make that change happen with action. And I don't know what action we could take. I always say peaceful protest. Don't go to work one day. If you say one day, millions of people, let's say 5 million, went to Washington, D.C., 5 million, we would force change so bad that they would have no other choice but to acquiesce to the wishes and the demands of the power of the people. But you got to believe it. And you do have that power, whether you realize it or not. Thank you very much for watching this video. And let's make it happen. All right. Let's make it a reality, because I got to have hope, because that's what's going to make the change necessary. Have a good weekend, everybody.